Hey everybody, Captain B-Nard here with your BHDL1 Week 7 recap and Week 8 preview. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this. So our opponent for this week was the notorious HIM. He is an up-and-coming competitive battler and PokeTuber as well. And going into this match, we were sitting at a 4-2 record, whereas my opponent was sitting at a 1-5 record. So this was a very important game for both of us for two very different reasons. So on my side, it was very important because if we win, we clinch bare minimum a wild card spot in the playoffs here in the BHDL1 versus for my opponent. If he does not win this game, he's actually mathematically eliminated from making playoffs contention. So it was a very important game for that reason, as pretty much all of these matches the last couple of weeks here in the league are going to be definitely after this week. Our matches are going to be very important these past couple of weeks. And so we did unfortunately end up losing this battle 3-0. It was a pretty disappointing game, I'm not going to lie, and for all the reasons we will get into in just a minute here. But yeah, having said all of that, we're going to go ahead and throw it over to the team preview screen. So here you can see the 6 Pokemon he brought to the battle on the right-hand side, 6 Pokemon I brought on the left-hand side. And so as you can see, he brought the Low-Kicks, the Tornadus, I believe that's Therian form, Gyarados, Lucario, Gardevoir, and Baxcalibur. And so, yeah, they're the only real surprise looking back on it. I know I said there wasn't really any surprises during the game, but the one surprise that I will say looking back on this match is that I was kind of surprised he didn't bring the Quagsire to this battle, as I felt like Quagsire had a really good matchup against my team, so I was a little surprised that he didn't bring that along. But other than that, nothing I didn't really expect. Looking at my team, we brought this week, it was pretty much the straight six, as I call them, which are the top six draft picks here that I've brought to most of my games. So those are going to be the Gastrodon, Hawlucha, Goodra, Pincurchin, Orthworm, and Iron Moth. So no real surprises there on my end of the game either. Like I said, pretty standard. So but yeah, having said that, we're going to keep moving right along here, and we're going to go ahead and throw it over to the weekly pros and cons. So as you can see here, this week we have only one pro and we have three cons. So we're going to go over all that as per the usual. So the only pro that I could think of this week is that I believe that this was actually a pretty even match on paper. So looking at not only the 6 Pokemon that we each brought to the game, but as well our drafts as a whole, I thought that this was a very even match, which usually makes for a pretty clean game. Usually makes things interesting if nobody really has a decided advantage over the other due to team matchups or anything like that. So that definitely was a plus. But as I mentioned, that is really the only pro this week. So having said that, we're going to go right into the cons of the week. And so obviously the big con of the week is going to be that we lost the game 3-0 because obviously we are trying to make playoffs here, and obviously losses do not do us any favors in trying to make playoffs. So yeah, that is the big con of the week. Almost as big of a con this week, I would say, would be the next one, which is the fact that I feel like I did play very poorly this week, and I have a lot of the specific examples of this. I've been thinking about this for a couple days since this game, and as I had alluded to before, this was a pretty rough game for me. I'm not sure what happened or what went down, but there were a lot of instances in this game where I made some questionable at best decisions, and that combined with some other stuff did lead to my downfall, I believe. So I'm going to call out a couple of these that I feel that were important ones. So the first one was pretty early in the game. In a situation where I have my Goodra in versus his Lucario. So what I end up doing is staying in and trying to attack the Lucario because I want to try and eliminate it. I don't know if he is going to try and set up on me. I'm kind of fearing the setup, so I try to just take it out outright, and he just outspeeds and takes me out with a close combat, which I would later learn, or I guess after the fact learn, that it appeared to be choice banded. So this was a mistake on my side, really, because I should have switched the Gudra out to try and preserve it, because Gudra did look pretty useful for most of his team. So I really should have tried to preserve that for later on in the game. But speaking of later on in the game, another kind of mistake that I think I made was toward the end of the battle. Once again, he has a Lucario in. I have the Gastrodon in this time. And so I am very torn between going for an Earth Power to take him out straight away if he does stay in, or going for the Ice Beam, predicting a switch into the Tornadus. The switch is really obvious into the Tornadus at this point in the game. I know he's choice locked into extreme speed at this point, I believe, so I know obviously choice band extreme speed is not going to KO a basically full health Gastrodon. So yeah, I should have 100% made that read and gone for the Ice Beam. Especially at this point in the game, I was so behind the 8 ball that I really should have uh, tried to make that prediction, just because that was doing predictions like that was the only conceivable way I could have clawed my way back into the game, and playing it safe would not have got me there, as indeed it didn't. So I definitely should have made that prediction as well. But the big mistake that I made this game, that in combination with the third thing on the list here, cost me this week, is going to be going back to early in the game. Immediately, actually, the turn after I lose Gudra to the close combat on the Lucario. At this point in the game, it is extremely obvious that the Lucario is choice banned, because the Gudra is max HP investment. So I believe I definitely survive a close combat if it's not choice banded there. So um, in this situation, I have a couple different options to try and deal with this Lucario. The Tailwind is up at this point, which means that nothing that I can come in with outspeeds the Lucario at the moment. But I do still have a couple different options to come in with. I have multiple Pokemon that resist the close combat, so I could have tried to come in with one of them and forced him out, or done something else. However, because the Tailwind is up, the way that I decide to tackle this situation is to come in with the Earthworm and attempt to use my Terra Fighting to try and survive a close combat, and then take him out with an attack on the other side. So on its face, this was a huge mistake on my side, because for a couple different reasons, actually, but the biggest of which was I really needed to try and conserve that Earthworm to deal with the Baxcalibur later on in the game. And Earthworm was my hands down best answer to Baxcalibur, so I should have definitely tried to conserve the Earthworm for that situation rather than bringing it here. Additionally, I shouldn't have, if I had other options, other than using my Terra, I shouldn't have used my Terra in this situation, or constructed a plan where I had to basically waste my Terra to get out of the situation, when I did have other potential ways to get out of the situation. So that was a huge mistake on my side, was even constructing this plan of coming in with Earthworm and going Terra Fighting to survive an attack and then take Lucario out with an attack. But if that wasn't bad enough, this turn, that brings us to the third con of the week, which is going to be, of course, the hacks. So in this turn, I do execute my poorly conceived plan of terastallizing the Earthworm into a fighting type, thus losing my weakness to the fighting type, and ensuring that I can survive a even max attack choice band close combat from a Lucario, from basically full health, I believe I was on the Earthworm. So I do have defense investment on the Earthworm, so I'm guaranteed to survive this attack. So I do that. He goes for the close combat, and unfortunately, he does end up getting a crit and taking the Earthworm out. So this was absolutely abysmal for a number of reasons, three actually. So in one fell swoop, I lose my Earthworm, I waste my Terra, and he still has a Lucario in play after that. So this was just absolutely the worst possible thing that could have happened to me in this situation. So yeah, that was the game was pretty much over after that. I tried to do what I could to come back from it, but having lost the Earthworm, which was again my best answer to the Baxcalibur, having wasted my Terra, which was equally as important, which meant I couldn't Terra the Hawlucha later in the game to try and mount any sort of like comeback or reverse sweep or anything like that. and also the fact that his Lucario got to survive that whole exchange while taking out two of my important Pokemon. It was pretty much over at that point. So I do, obviously, the hacks are the hacks. You can't really do anything about that. Obviously, had the crit not occurred, I would have survived the attack and gotten rid of the Lucario. Would have been an entirely different game. Can't say for sure, obviously, who would have won or lost, because obviously that would have been an entirely different game at that point. But I will say it is still largely my fault as well, because as I have stated already, I definitely shouldn't have put myself in that position. I shouldn't have um, used this plan to try and deal with the Lucario. I had other less risky, better options to deal with the Lucario than doing this. Um, and for whatever reason in my mind, I just didn't see it or didn't think that those were better options at the time, even though in hindsight, and there were pretty obviously better options on the table. So like I said, that was really the worst possible outcome of the situation. As I devise and execute a very poorly conceived plan, and it completely goes to shit because I get critted too. So I played very badly and I paid for it, and that just kind of is what it is. I can't hold anything against my opponent. Obviously, he did what he had to do to secure the win, keeping his playoff hopes alive at this point. And yeah, he did what he had to do, and definitely got the job done. But yeah, that was very disappointing. Like I said, this was even a couple days later. Looking back on this match, doing this commentary now, this was, I think, it's it's still kind of fresh, so it's hard for me to gauge. But this is um, definitely up there. It's hard for me to say between this and what happened in week two with the Hall Lucha freeze, which was the more disappointing loss thus far this season. This one's pretty fresh in my mind, obviously, and obviously I played a factor in my own demise in this one. So I want to say this one kind of is more disappointing just based on the fact that I could have done things differently to avoid this outcome, and unfortunately, I didn't. Um, so yeah, very disappointing week, disappointing loss, and yeah, I guess that's all I pretty much have to say about that. But that is actually going to feed us into um, transactions this week, or post this week. So I actually did decide to make what is going to end up being my last transaction for the season here, because the cutoff for transactions is this week actually. So post week 7, pre week 8 transactions, and I think because you're only allowed 5 transactions. I think I'm not 100% sure if this counts because of the way the math works out. Is I changed Terra Captains a few times, and they were both 1 to 2 ratios, so I'm not sure how that pans out, if I would even have an extra transaction left over, as this would either equal 4 or 5 transactions. I don't know. But regardless of any of that, as you can see on the screen here, the transaction I chose to make was basically a reversal of a transaction that I did a few weeks ago, which was I removed the Terra Captain status from Orthworm and Pink Urchin, and I gave it back to Arcanine. Now, there really are 2 reasons for doing this, and the bigger of the 2 reasons might actually shock you guys. So I'm going to go over why I chose to do this week. Um, the secondary reason that I did this was because obviously Arcanine is very powerful as a Terra Captain, especially compared to Orthworm and Pincurchin. Now, the main reason that I made this switch in the first place, because as you guys will remember, Arcanine was originally a Terra Captain on the team for the first few weeks. Um, the reason I made this change in the first place was that obviously Arcanine's a Pokemon that has not come basically at all to any of my games this season. I believe out of the 7 weeks that I've played this season, it's come to 1 game. So I felt like putting the Terra Captain position on Pokemon like Orthworm and Pincurchin, which are Pokemon that I'm bringing just about every week to battle, if not every week to battle, was a good idea, because that would open me up to have more options to deal with things, and just more versatility and whatnot. Um, so the main reason that I decided to reverse this, this week is because I've kind of, and this might sound like a dumb reason to you guys, but I am going to give you my thought process and my logic because, as I had mentioned, the secondary reason is that yes, Arcanine's a very powerful Terra Captain, and I definitely could bring it. To some of my last games here, but the main reason that I chose to do this was because I feel like having that Terra Captain on these Pokemon, particularly on the Earthworm, has led me to make some very questionable at best plays and decisions in the last few weeks of the league games here, and in multiple occasions now, those questionable decisions that I've made ended up costing me big, both in weeks 6 and 7. Actually, these back-to-back losses that we've taken. Um, so I kind of felt like the easiest and best way that I could remove that chance from happening again was to actually remove the ability for me to be able to make such a mistake again, believe it or not. So that's actually the primary driving force as to why I chose to make this decision. Because now, obviously, with Orthworm Pincurchin not being Terra Captains, I will not be um, tempted to make such ill-conceived plays in the future. I guess we'll put it that way. And I will be, I think, more focused on doing what made my team successful more toward the beginning of the season, which is kind of focusing on Hawlucha as a Terra captain, and then perhaps on Arcanine if it does come to the game. So yeah, that's really the main reason that I did that, and I'm hoping that by doing that, going forward with the league, that'll kind of help me get my head straight and help me refocus into what I have to do to make playoffs in the coming weeks. So as I had mentioned before, in the last video with this loss this week, the Philadelphia Pidgeys dropped to a 4-3 record. So we've kind of gone from being in a pretty good position to being in a kind of bad position these past couple weeks, to be honest with you guys, because the situation is this: we are sitting at a 4-3 record. But now, because we've lost to a player who now has a tiebreaker over us. A couple of players, actually, these back-to-back losses, who have tiebreakers over us head-to-head, and who, if they both continue to do good, may actually end up in a position where those head-to-head tiebreakers could matter. Not only that comes into play, but additionally, what's going to be coming into play now is a lot of the coaches with the same record as me are winning their games, whereas I am losing my games these past couple weeks, which is definitely putting us in a little bit of a tight spot as far as trying to make the playoffs and or wild card spots. So, having said all of that, that is going to bring us to our Week 8 game and our Week 8 opponent. And that is going to be, I'm not sure how he says this, either Jason or Jay Sean, uh, or Jason 12, not sure. One of those things. But in any event, here's a snapshot of his team on the screen here. He has a lot of high point value threats, a few of which I should say. The notable ones here are going to be the Iron Valiant, the Corviknight, and the Iron Bundle. So those are some pretty strong high point value threats he's got on deck. Additionally, he has some nice value pickups like the Cyclizar, Armarouge, Crocodile, Garganackle, Toxtricity. So he's got a very strong, well put together team, as does pretty much everybody in this league. Now, this game is going to be definitely one to watch and definitely a critical game. I dare say perhaps the most critical game this season for us to this point, for a couple different reasons. But the main reason is that this guy has almost the same record as we do, and he is going to be in direct competition for a playoff and or wild card spot with us. So whoever wins between us is going to have the head-to-head over the other, obviously, which is going to be huge going into the end of the season here. So we really, really need a win this week over this team to try and get back into the swing of it, get back into a good spot to make playoffs here. And so I've been thinking already quite a bit as to how I can tackle this team. Obviously, not going to reveal anything about that here because I don't want to shoot myself in the foot any worse than I already do by doing these videos. So, but yeah, it is definitely going to be another tough week for us, and also one of, if not probably the most critical week of the league for us thus far next week. So that is definitely going to be one to watch. But that'll pretty much do it for this one. So thanks for watching again, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future. So that's it, and we'll see you next time.